You are welcome to Tuga Media TV. Relax and listen to this interesting story. The Journey of Ku Nemo, a tale of struggle, hope, and triumph. The struggle in the village. Ku Nemo's story began in a small, remote village nestled in the heart of West Africa. His village, like many others in the region, was cut off from the outside world, its inhabitants living a life shaped by the rhythms of nature. The land was harsh and the seasons unforgiving. It was a place where the soil didn't always yield crops and where food was never in abundance. From a young age, Ku learned the harshness of his environment. His family was poor, their farm barely producing enough to feed them. He could see the worry in his mother's eyes as she worked tirelessly alongside his father, both of them trying to scrape together a meager existence. Ku's parents had high hopes for him, but despite their best efforts, the opportunities for success in their village were limited. Education was a distant dream, and the idea of finding work beyond the village was almost inconceivable. Ku Nemo worked the fields from dawn to dusk, planting maize and harvesting cassava. There were no machines, no advanced tools, only hard labor. The struggle for food and basic necessities was constant, and at times it seemed as if the whole world was closing in on him. But Ku was determined. His father had taught him that hard work was the only way to survive. And Ku followed that advice with every ounce of energy he had. Despite his tireless efforts, it seemed that no matter how much he worked, the fruits of his labor were always just out of reach. It was a constant cycle of planting, waiting, harvesting, and struggling. The village's small market offered few opportunities to make money, and the few people who made a living from trade often did so in ways that felt out of reach to Ku. There were no jobs to be had. Every day, he went to bed exhausted but still hungry. One evening, as Ku sat by the fire, gazing into the flickering flames, he overheard two men talking. Their conversation was about a place far away, America. They spoke of the opportunities there, the promises of a better life. America, the land of dreams where anyone could succeed if they worked hard enough. The words struck Ku deeply. He had always known that his village, his home, would never be enough for him. He knew there had to be something more. I need to leave, Ku whispered to himself. The next day, Ku sought out the men who had been talking about America. They gave him a glimpse of the possibilities. People from his village had made it to the United States, but the journey was long, dangerous, and expensive. There were stories of migrants crossing rivers, traveling through forests, and facing wild animals along the way. It wasn't a journey for the faint of heart, but Ku had nothing left to lose. The men told him about the people in neighboring countries, Brazil and Mexico, who could help him with the journey. He didn't know where he would find the money to make it all the way, but he knew that this was his only chance. After speaking with his parents and explaining his plans, Ku set off to begin his journey. With the little money he had saved from his work, Ku began to travel toward the borders of neighboring countries. It was a journey full of uncertainty, but there was a fire in his heart, a fire that told him he was meant for something more. And so, with little more than hope and determination, Ku left behind the village that had been his home for all his life. The journey was every bit as difficult as the men had warned. Ku first arrived in Brazil, but the welcome he received was far from warm. There were few people willing to help a poor African migrant, and Ku quickly learned that the roads to success were not paved with kindness. In Brazil, Ku tried to find work and earn some money to continue his journey. However, the people there were just as struggling as he was, and there was no one willing to offer him a job or help him cross to the United States. The only option was to keep moving. He sought out those who might assist him in getting further north, but all he found were empty promises. One day, as he was traveling along the Brazilian countryside, Ku encountered a raging river. He had heard stories of people who had crossed such rivers to make their way to Mexico, but the water looked impossibly deep and swift. Still, the idea of turning back was not an option. He had no choice but to forge ahead. He stood at the edge of the river, contemplating how he would cross. The current was strong, and the water was cold, but Ku knew he had to get across. The journey had already cost him so much, and he was not about to let a river stop him. Taking a deep breath, he plunged into the water. The river tugged at him, and for a moment, Ku feared that the current would pull him under, but his desperation kept him going. With every stroke, Ku felt the weight of his struggle, but he never faltered. After what seemed like an eternity, he made it to the other side, drenched but alive. The river had not defeated him. The jungle and the wild. The jungle that followed was no less dangerous than the river. The heat was suffocating, and the dense vegetation made it nearly impossible to see the path ahead. But Ku knew he had to keep moving. Every day, he walked for hours, fighting exhaustion, hunger, and the relentless humidity of the jungle. There were days when the only thing he could do was keep walking, pushing himself forward, with the hope that one more step would bring him closer to his goal. Along the way, he encountered wild animals, and the sound of predators prowling in the underbrush was enough to send chills down his spine. One night, while camped by the edge of the forest, Ku heard rustling in the bushes. He grabbed the small knife he had brought with him and slowly crept toward the noise. To his surprise, a large, snarling jaguar emerged from the shadows, its eyes gleaming in the moonlight. Ku's heart pounded in his chest. The jaguar seemed to be sizing him up, deciding whether he was prey. For a moment, time seemed to stop. But then, Ku remembered his survival instincts. He wasn't going to let an animal stand in his way. With all his strength, he shouted loudly and waved his arms. The jaguar hesitated, then turned and disappeared into the darkness. Shaken but alive, Ku realized just how far he had come. The dangers of the jungle had tested him in ways he never could have imagined, but he had survived. There was nothing, it seemed, that could stop him now. Mexico and the border. After weeks of traveling through the jungle, Ku finally reached Mexico. He was exhausted, sick, and starving. The few people he encountered in Mexico were as indifferent as those he had met in Brazil. They could see his desperation, but offered no help. Ku spent his nights on the streets, and during the day, he wandered from one border crossing to the next, hoping to find someone who could help him cross into the United States. But each time, he was met with rejection. Finally, after much searching, Ku came across a man who claimed to have connections to a smuggler who could get him across the border. The cost, however, was exorbitant, far more than Ku could afford. But he had no choice. He had come this far, and the thought of returning to Africa was too painful to even consider. Ku borrowed money from a local man who promised to help him, and with a mixture of fear and hope, he crossed the border into the United States. A new beginning in America. Ku's arrival in the United States was bittersweet. He had made it, but he had no money, no job, and no idea where to start. His first few months in the U.S. were difficult. He struggled to find stable work, and life in the city was overwhelming. But one day, while working at a small factory, Ku met a woman who would change his life forever. Her name was Abena Bruwa, an African-American woman with a radiant smile and a warm heart. Abena was kind and understanding, and Ku quickly found himself drawn to her. She had come from a similar background, and her life had been filled with its own challenges. But in Abena, Ku found someone who understood his struggle, someone who believed in him. Their connection was immediate. They spent long nights talking about their dreams, their pasts, and the future they both desired. In time, Ku and Abena fell in love, and they married shortly after. Together, they built a family, welcoming two beautiful children into their lives, from factory worker to businessman. Despite the challenges they faced, Ku and Abena never stopped working hard. Ku found a job as a factory worker, where he spent long hours each day doing everything he could to provide for his family. But Ku never stopped dreaming. He knew that he had the potential to do more, to be more. As the years passed, Ku worked tirelessly, learning about business, finance, and entrepreneurship. He took night classes whenever he could, furthering his education while balancing his full-time job. Slowly but surely, Ku began to build a network of people who saw his potential and supported his ambitions. Eventually, Ku started his own business, a small but successful venture in the manufacturing sector. His hard work and perseverance paid off. His business grew, and Ku began employing others, many of whom had come to America looking for a better life, just like he had. But Ku's success didn't end there. He never forgot where he came from, and he always dreamed of returning to his home country to help his people. After years of hard work, Ku made enough money to return to Africa, where he started a new business that employed hundreds of people. He built schools, offered scholarships, and invested in the future of his village. A life built with love and hard work. Years later, Ku stood before a house he had built with his own hands. It was a beautiful modern home that stood as a symbol of his success. His wife, Abena, and their children stood beside him, smiling. Ku had made it. He had gone from a poor boy in a village with no opportunities to a successful businessman, a husband, and a father. He had crossed rivers, walked through jungles, and faced countless dangers, all in the name of creating a better life. He looked at his family, his employees, and his community. He had overcome every obstacle that life had thrown at him, and in doing so, he had changed the course of his destiny. His journey had not been easy, but it had been worth it. He had made it, and now he was giving back to those who had once been in his shoes, showing them that with hard work, faith, and perseverance, anything was possible. I may have started with nothing, but now I have everything I ever dreamed of. I built this life from the ground up, and I know that if I can do it, anyone can. Thanks for watching this video in Tuga Media TV. Subscribe for more videos. Your end shall be greater than your beginning. Have a wonderful and blessed day, precious one. In his light, you shall see the light of abundant rain, good health, and prosperity. You are protected from evil and shame. Peace up.